Today, we're going to be getting into that technical analysis for the SPY Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, and Nvidia. And at the end of this video, we're actually going to show you guys some of the data that's coming up. But before we do that, let's get into some charts. And the first thing I wanted to do here was bring up actually Nvidia, because I just noticed Nvidia, we were talking about how on the hourly, and we'll show that in a second, look like Nvidia might be leading this market and saying that a negative trend is coming. And I just wanted to point out on the daily here that we actually do see this red bar. We're testing that 20-day moving average, right? But down here on the MACD, we're actually getting that first red impression on the histogram for the MACD. Okay, so I just really wanted to point that out to you guys. Looks like Nvidia is starting to make a little bit of a negative trend while the rest of the market is slightly lagging behind. So it's something to pay attention to. If you missed yesterday's video, we're overall paying attention to this point of 459.54, maybe for some kind of bounce. And then overall, I am actually really paying attention to this zone down in here. I really think this zone is important. It comes in confluence with just a solid amount of liquidity. And when we actually break through that level, we see some upward side. Okay, so if we are able to kind of use this like a little bit of a trampoline, if you want to imagine like your friend when you were playing on the trampoline or whatever, you jump your highest and then your friend bounces at the same time ago to kind of springboard you up. Okay, so that's overall what I'm looking at for Nvidia, and I'm really paying attention to this zone. Video, we really started to pay attention to this on Wednesday, and this is when we pointed this out. Okay, this is the first one to really go into negative territory on an hourly, while others are kind of trickling like this up in here. We're actually seeing Nvidia drop down into that negative territory, and you're starting to see that downward trend, right? We're getting a low, we're getting a lower low, we're getting another low. But this is consolidation at this point, right? So we could see this break to the upside, we could see it break down. We have to kind of pay attention to what's happening over the next few days, which is pretty important when we talk about the data at the end of this video. The good part with Nvidia being at this level, okay, the good part is if we do see some kind of bounce, let's say we bounce up to this level, if the MACD on the hourly actually does get into positive territory and roll back over, you're going to notice we're right in that negative territory. So we're most likely going to see a downward trend continue. I just wanted to point that out. And if you were looking for this to say recover, maybe in a more bullish stance, right? Then we would say we really want a good, strong move into that positive territory to start a new positive trend. All right, so that's what I'm paying attention to on Nvidia, but we are in that negative territory, and I believe it might be leading the market and saying what might happen over the next few weeks. Talking about on the SPY, how we're outside of that monthly range. We're outside of that monthly range for the month of November, and we're going to get a new range in a few days. So I do give those monthly ranges on my Patreon. You can go look at that. There's a link down in the description, and that's going to be updated as of this Thursday night. So I'm going to update that Thursday night and post it on there. But we're paying attention to the weekly ranges, and overall, I just really wanted to point out this new trend line I kind of put here. I just attached a trend line between the all-time high and our other high up here, and you'll notice where we're starting to kind of struggle or consolidate. Right, we could be considering this consolidation to make a move higher to touch the top side of our weekly expected move, but we're starting to struggle to close cleanly above this area. And I just thought it was interesting that this is where we're starting to halt kind of that trend between the two. Now we have to pay attention to the data, because the data tomorrow is going to be GDP. We're going to get into that at the end of this video, because the numbers that we're seeing could come out very high. So we really want to look at those. Now, if you weren't here for yesterday's video, these zones down in here are really what I'm paying attention to. I really like this one here for maybe a little bit less of a sell-off, or maybe just it's so the lesser sell-offs would be some kind of retest of that flag that we broke out of, and then we start to head higher, or maybe we come into this area, and then the ultimate, I would say the best zone for us to really get a big bounce from would be down in these levels of about 424 or I guess it's like 422 to 426. But the reason I'm pointing that out is just because we bounced from that level before, we gapped above it right here, and that kind of started a big run. So it's something to pay attention to. This is where I'm overall really leaning towards, but I am open to a scenario where we bounce from a higher up level, right? Where we bounce from a higher up level, and just because this MACD is so high up, all I really have to pay attention to is if we just curl back over in positive territory. Okay, so if we do get some kind of pullback over the next few weeks, then that's mainly what I'll be paying attention to. The Qs overall on, I guess, the weekly scale, you are in an uptrend. We took out this high, right? High. We can say this is a higher low still. If we, pull up a weekly or something like that, maybe it'll seem, more obvious here. We can see we have that high. We have a higher low at this point, and we're moving to a higher high. So if we are going to go down to lower levels. I'm kind of paying attention to this trend here, but if we go back to the daily, I can show you guys those zones if you guys weren't here for it. I'm still paying attention to similar levels of the SPY. I believe that we could see a decent size drop to get down into this level, maybe even test this again, kind of confirming that as a trend with a third touch, and then we can springboard higher, maybe touching the top of this wedge that I have drawn out. So we just have to pay attention to it, but we really just want to pay attention to the MACD rolling over. And if it's able to roll over again in positive territory, then we can kind of say that the probabilities are with us that this trend of positivity, this bullishness, is going to continue. So I did want to bring up the Qs on an hourly just to compare it to that Nvidia MACD, right? We can see that the Nvidia MACD is actually trailing lower, starting a little bit of a negative trend, but the Qs overall are still in positive territory. Yes, you're close to that center line, so you're close to starting a negative trend, but this could be consolidation at this point to pop higher. And that's why overall, to the bullish side, I'm really paying attention to that weekly expected move, right? That's what the options have priced in. So this would be what's expected if we get some bullishness. And then if we do start to break down, I am going to pay attention to the bottom side of that weekly expected move for some kind of bounce in the short term. But that doesn't mean that this wouldn't be a negative trend, right? If we see a significant bounce from here, but you see that MACD is actually going into negative territory, right? If it's going into negative territory, we bounce back up and then we curl back into negative territory, you're most likely going to see that trend continue because you now have what's a lower low at this point, and then you come up, you make a lower high, and then we crash down again, cutting out this low. So that's just really what I'm paying attention to in the shorter time frames for the Qs, but you are still in positive territory, so you do have a shot to go touch the upside of that weekly expected move. On the daily here, I think this would be good to point out, like I was mainly paying attention to this purple zone. And there's a bunch of reasons I'm paying attention to it, right? We've seen it explode higher from this zone. We've used it plenty of times to really get that trampoline effect in this zone, and we've struggled to break through it. And when we do break through it, it seems short-lived, right? So we do have buyers in this zone at this point, and we could be looking at some kind of retest. So I was paying attention to a retest, and the reason that I'm paying attention to this level is because of this fib retracement. Okay, if we do get a fib retracement, this actually here is my golden pocket, and that is within the purple zone here, and it's also right in line with some kind of retest. It's right in line with that 200. It looks like a very good area for the stock to hold up and maybe use that purple zone to head to higher levels. In the shorter time frames, the hourly, you just notice that we are getting some flagging here. So we're getting some flagging. It looks like we're dropping down in the post market as of right now. So we want to pay attention to that. This could just be another move, but if we actually measure that out, right, that squiggly line there, if we measure that out, we actually can see that that would line up with kind of the bottom of this, well, what previously was a resistance zone, right? We've seen some major sell-offs from that area there, but we can see that we would be heading towards the bottom of our weekly expected move. So I would be paying attention to that, but if we are able to cut this low, it's a pretty good sign that we're starting that negative trend as Apple is dipping into that negative territory. I wouldn't say that it's fully started that trend yet, because if you do curl up, you can see us maybe go test this high, maybe test these closing bars up here, or we could just see an extension of this in this flagging. So I just wanted to point that out, but it really looks like we want to cut this low and start a negative trend very soon. Amazon's still kind of trickling higher, right? These are very wonky price action bars on the daily chart, but all I'm noticing here is we are starting to really struggle and kind of struggle around the area of the trend between our most two recent highs. Okay, so I'm paying attention to that. We even came all the way up really close to it, and we see us push down just a tiny bit yesterday. And today we're actually seeing kind of like, I would say, indecision at this point. It looks like we can't tell. There's no reason, I guess, to go higher at this point, and the bears don't have reason to sell. So we do need something that will shake up this market if we're going to see some kind of pullback. Right now, I just pay attention to these Bollinger Bands are getting tight, so I would expect some kind of big move in Amazon, and that's why I'm paying attention down to, at this zone right around that 126 level. I'm really paying attention to this zone because we've used it as support in the past, right? So we've used this level as support plenty of times, and so we can see a bounce from that area if we do get some dramatic selling. Now, Tesla, we were paying attention to this structure in here, okay? We look like we had a continuation triangle, and we see that boom to the upside, okay? 4.51% in one day. We're testing this high, right? As of like the end of the day, we're testing that high, and we could go a little bit higher. So what I wanted to find was a point where we could maybe stop, maybe see some sellers step in. I'm overall paying attention to this trend, okay? This little trend here between these 3 points could come in as important because we're heading right into it. We've seen some sell-offs once we do hit that trend, so we want to pay attention to it, and the expected move from this is not very high. So we really want to pay attention to it, but it's very cool to see if our patience paid off, right? We could see if this was at 242, we got 5 extra points out of that move if we waited for the break at this point. We could have had a little bit higher. I'd be paying attention to this point, maybe even tomorrow, but right at 250. People in the market, they do like solid numbers, so we do gravitate to solid numbers, and 250 is one of those solid numbers at this point. We do see selling from this area. This is the level I'm paying attention to. Just areas where we've seen bounces, right? Areas where we've seen bounces, areas where we gapped above it, right? So we gapped through that zone, so maybe that's a little bit important. And now we can use it as support. So you notice we gap above it, we use it as some support at that point, and then we see that explosion, kind of like Apple. So I really want to pay attention to that zone. I think you have a very good shot of filling this gap soon. But I really, if we go to head to lower levels, I'm going to be paying attention to this area right in here, which is right around that 207.42 that we've been paying attention to ever since we saw this breakdown. You're looking to use those shorter time frames to find out, when that turnaround's going to be. I'd really pull up the hourly, look at this divergence, and see if it confirms. If this confirms, this could even be double top at this point, right between this high and this high here. So we could see that confirm, and you'd be looking for this level right here to be broken out from that previous continuation triangle. So we really want to pay attention to that, but it pays to be patient, right? It pays to be patient because if this thing does just keep going up like this, you could still have that divergence in play. So we want to be very patient and wait for this to confirm before we start to get bearish on Tesla at this point. Yields we are seeing really break down. Okay, we're really seeing those yields break down, and we're not really seeing bullishness from this, which is kind of interesting to me. I figured we would actually make a little bit leg higher if this actually broke this level, this previous high right here. So we want to pay attention to that. I still think you have a good shot of this starting to go up, just because if we pull up TLT, you'll notice we're still in that wedge, right? We broke barely below it if you pull up an hourly chart, but we are noticing it's getting even tighter. So if I pull up an hourly here, you're just going to notice this is getting tight once again, and we haven't seen that explosive move, most likely because we haven't gotten any data. We haven't got Fed Jerome Powell talking or anything like that yet. So we're going to need some data, and it looks like we're starting to run out of time in this wedge. So we really need to see, is this going to continue to be a positive thing, right? Is this going to continue in positive territory here and then start a new upward trend? Or is this going to break us down? And since we're so close to that center line, is this going to break down maybe suddenly and start a negative trend? That's just what we want to pay attention to. But the price action is getting really tight on the hourly. It's even tighter than when we mentioned it was tight a couple days ago. Overall thing I'm paying attention to as of today on the VIX, a little bit different, is the Bollinger Bands are starting to get tight. An explosive move could be coming, but I really would have liked the VIX to test this level of 1212. So maybe even tomorrow we actually do get that test of 1212, cut below this Bollinger Band, get that retest, and then maybe we get some explosiveness in the VIX. So we really want to pay attention to that because these Bollinger Bands, when they do get really tight and they are starting to coil up, we get a big move, okay? So we see them get pretty tight. Like if we want to just point out maybe this zone right in here, right? We got really tight. We were tight for quite some time, and then boom, we explode to the upside. And then we start to get tight again, right? And then we come to the downside. So we just want to pay attention to that at this point. Looks like volatility could enter this market any point in the next few days. So the question is, does, GDP, does core PCE, does personal income, do these things actually affect what Jerome Powell is going to talk about on Friday this week? Is Fed Jerome Powell going to come out and try to sound hawkish? It really seems like he's trying to convince us he's hawkish while he's actually dovish. So we really want to pay attention to what he actually says after this data is released. If he says, the economy is coming in too strong and we need to keep those rate raises on the table, we'll have to find out. And then maybe going into, December 12th, December 13th, that we will see that Fed rate decision and we'll see those CPI numbers. So it's really important to pay attention to these types of things. And I do watch every single speech. So over the weekend, I will be going over what he has said in his speech on Friday. Looking into this, we will probably get into this next week, but you can see December 12th, we actually get that core inflation rate. Okay, so we're going to pay attention to this as of next week. But first, we have to see really what Jerome Powell says this Friday. And then after that, you notice that on the 13th, we actually do get that Fed rate decision. So this will be very, very important. And the FOMC economic projections could be important. And then we also get that press conference. So we could see multiple reactions over the next few weeks. And that's why we have to pay attention to if we're going to start that negative trend or if this positive trend is going to continue into the future. So the overall takeaway here is Nvidia is starting that negative trend, and maybe it's hinting, especially with the daily MACD crossing, giving us that red impression on the histogram. Maybe that is actually hinting that we are going to see more selling over the next few weeks. And I really want to pay attention to that because Jerome Powell is talking. So if we do start a negative trend and Jerome Powell comes out as hawkish, that could be very negative for the market. So it's very important for me to pay attention to also those new monthly ranges, because that's what the options market is going to expect these stocks to move over the month of December. And maybe we go touch the bottom of that before we're able to see bullishness get back in. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You guys always like, subscribe. You guys do all this stuff. I'm trying to finish my course here, so we're trying to finish that. But for now, you can get those weekly and those monthly ranges down there on my Patreon. Once again, I wish you guys all the luck in the world trading this week. Okay, peace.